December 22nd, 2025, at 02:00 p.m., the Caribbean Sea, 150 miles north of the Venezuelan coast. Out here, the heat is not just a number on a thermometer. It is a tangible weight pressing down on the flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, bending the air until the horizon looks like it is melting into the sky. Beneath that shimmering mirage, the water appears calm, deceptively calm. Inside the Combat Direction Center, known simply as the CDC, the tension is so thick, it could crush a submarine. Radar screens glow faint green in the dim room, sweeping tirelessly in relentless circles. Every rotation paints a picture of isolation, a picture of raw, unchallenged power. At the center of it, all floats 100,000 tons of American diplomacy in motion. The USS Gerald R. Ford is far more than a ship. It is a sovereign piece of U.S. territory, a floating city of steel and nuclear fire. From bow to stern, it stretches 160 feet. It rises 25 stories above the sea, and deep inside its armored hull, 2 A-1B nuclear reactors hum steadily. Together, they generate enough power to light a city the size of Orlando for 20 years without refueling. That is not a warning. That is a statement. Normally, a leviathan like this prowls the cold gray waters of the North Atlantic or the contested lanes of the South China Sea. Its purpose is simple: to remind every other superpower that the oceans have a landlord. One that watches, one that waits, and one that can strike with precision anywhere its flag flies. This is Titan Navy. If you want to see how America projects naval power and controls the seas without firing a shot, like the video, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. The story of this floating fortress is just beginning, and the Caribbean heat is about to get a lot hotter. But today is different. Today, the Ford is not patrolling the world. It is parked deliberately off the northern edge of South America. The White House calls this deployment Operation Southern Spear. To the press, it's framed as a counter-narcotics mission. But when you park a supercarrier loaded with 75 combat aircraft off the coast of an independent nation, you're not there to chase drug runners in fiberglass speedboats. You're there to deliver an ultimatum. On December 11th, 2025, that ultimatum was delivered. The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot. Contact bearing 180. Range 12 miles. The radar operator's voice cuts through the CDC flat, controlled, emotionless. There is no panic. This room is the brain of the battle group, a cavern of blue light and humming cooling systems. Dozens of sailors sit in tight rows. Faces washed in the glow of monitors, tracking everything from the seabed to the edge of the stratosphere. To understand why U.S. warships are tracking contacts off the coast of Venezuela, you have to go back to November 13th, 2025. That was the day Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stepped up to the podium inside the Pentagon briefing room. He didn't speak in diplomatic abstractions. He didn't mention negotiations or future talks. He announced a maximum pressure campaign. The target was the so-called Cartel of the Suns, a shadow organization allegedly run by senior officers within the Venezuelan military accused of flooding the United States with fentanyl and cocaine. But this time, Hegseth did something different, something new. He didn't just call them criminals. He designated the Cartel of the Suns as a foreign terrorist organization. That single label changed everything. You don't read Miranda rights to terrorists. You don't serve them warrants. You don't negotiate. You stop them by any means necessary. Within 48 hours of that announcement, the USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group received new orders. Turn south. It wasn't just the carrier. Guided missile destroyers USS Bainbridge, USS Mahan, and USS Winston S. Churchill formed a tight phalanx of steel around her. Suddenly, 15,000 U.S. sailors and Marines were sitting in the Caribbean Sea. For Washington, it was pressure. For Caracas, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like an invasion force. President Nicolas Maduro appeared on state television wearing green fatigues. He declared a maximum national alert. The militia was mobilized. Russian-made mobile missile batteries were moved into position, Along the coastal cliffs, their launchers angled toward the sea. "The Empire is coming for our oil," he told the cameras. "We will turn the Caribbean into a graveyard." The stage was set. Two forces stared at each other across 100 miles of open water. The US Navy had overwhelming technology. Venezuela had home field advantage. And in a standoff like this, it only takes one nervous lieutenant, one twitch of a finger on a trigger to turn a police action into a war. Fast forward to today. On the flight deck of the Ford, the air itself seems to tear apart as the electromagnetic launch system fires an F-35 Lightning II off the bow. There's no roar of steam, no clouded explosion, just a sharp magnetic snap that hurls the jet from 0 to 150 miles per hour in 2 seconds. The aircraft screams skyward, banking hard to port its afterburner glowing like a diamond against the tropical sky. These pilots are flying freedom of navigation routes, pushing right up to the edge of the 12-mile territorial limit. They are daring Venezuelan air defense radars to lock on. The radios crackle with warnings in Spanish, heavy with static and anger. "United States aircraft, you are approaching a restricted zone. Turn away or you will be fired upon." The American pilots don't turn. They don't even respond. They simply watch their sensors recording every frequency, every radar pulse, every electronic breath of the Venezuelan defense network. But the real confrontation isn't happening in the air. It's happening on the surface. At 04-hour Bor 0 AM, a US MQ-4C Triton surveillance drone detected a vessel of interest. The target was the MT Skipper, a massive supertanker flying the flag of Guyana, but riding unusually low in the water. Heavy. Intelligence confirmed it wasn't carrying Guyanese oil. It was loaded with Venezuelan crude millions of dollars worth of black gold, bound for the black market. Money meant to buy loyalty. Money meant to keep generals quiet in Caracas. Under normal maritime law, stopping a merchant vessel in international waters would be considered piracy, an act of war. But this wasn't being treated as a merchant ship. With the terrorist designation in place, the Pentagon classified the tanker as a financial asset of a terrorist organization. The order came down directly from the White House Situation Room. "Take it." The destroyer USS Gravely broke formation. It surged forward at 30 knots, its bow carving a white scar through the dark ocean. 10 miles out, a Venezuelan patrol vessel moved to intercept. Smaller, faster, it turned broadside, signaling it was ready to fight. The radio channels lit up. "American forces, stay away from that vessel. You are violating international law." The Gravely did not slow. Instead, it positioned itself squarely between the tanker and the Venezuelan ship. The destroyer's 5-inch deck gun rotated with a mechanical whine, locking onto the patrol craft. "Venezuelan vessel, this is the United States Navy. Alter your course immediately, or we will take defensive action." Then silence. The distance kept closing. 8 miles. Then 6. This wasn't maneuvering anymore. This was a game of chicken played with 9,000 tons of steel. If the Venezuelans fired a warning shot, Gravely would fire back. If Gravely fired, the coastal missile batteries would light up. If those batteries fired, the Ford would launch the air wing. World War II was 6 miles away. At 4 miles, the Venezuelan patrol ship slowed. The white water behind it faded. Then it turned hard to starboard, peeling away toward the coast. They blinked first. Minutes later, a boarding team from the US Coast Guard operating off the destroyer climbed onto the skipper. There was no fight, no resistance. The crew surrendered immediately. The American flag was raised over the tanker's bridge. The seizure of the skipper sent shockwaves through the global energy market. Oil prices jumped 4% in less than an hour. But the real explosion wasn't economic. It was political. Caracas called it state piracy. Officials threatened to deploy submarines to escort future shipments. In Washington, President Trump didn't retreat. He doubled down. On December 17th, he issued a new directive, a total and complete blockade. The tweet and the executive order that followed authorized the U.S. Navy to stop board and seize any vessel suspected of carrying banned Venezuelan oil. This was a historic shift. A blockade under international law is an act of war. The USS Gerald R. Ford was no longer just a show of force. It was now the enforcer of a siege. The Pentagon released a map showing a maritime safety zone stretching miles off the Venezuelan coast. Any ship entering or leaving without authorization was now considered a target. Civilian aviation reacted immediately. Airlines panicked. The FAA issued warnings declaring the airspace hazardous. American Airlines canceled flights. The sky over Venezuela went quiet. This is where the situation turns dangerous. Venezuela isn't facing this alone. Intelligence reports confirmed by satellite imagery show Russian military advisors operating on the ground. There are credible reports of advanced anti-ship cruise missiles being unloaded from shipping containers at the port of La Guaira. These aren't defensive weapons. They're designed for one purpose: killing aircraft carriers. The Ford is a floating fortress, but it's also an enormous target. And in modern warfare, you don't need to sink a carrier to win. You just need to hit it. One missile punching through the flight deck, destroying parked aircraft and killing sealers would be a propaganda victory heard for 100 years. The day the American carrier burned, the Navy knows this. That's why the Ford is never alone. Destroyers USS Thomas Hudner and USS Mason have tightened their defensive screen. Their radar systems are radiating at full power, cutting through electronic clutter, hunting for anything that moves faster than a bird. But the threat isn't just big missiles. It's asymmetric, swarm attacks, fast boats, cheap drones packed with explosives. The same technology that disrupted shipping in the Red Sea has now arrived in the Caribbean. Can a $13 billion nuclear-powered carrier defend itself against 1,000 drones that cost $500 each? The Navy says yes. The simulations say maybe. And while the warships circle each other at sea, the shadow war on land is heating up. Official figures say 15,000 U.S. troops are now positioned across the region. But if you look closely at the blurry images circulating on social media, there's something else hiding in plain sight. Black helicopters, flying low, skimming the jungle canopy at night. These aren't transport birds. They belong to the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. These are the pilots who fly Navy SEALs and Delta Force into places no one is supposed to know about. You don't deploy the Night Stalkers to deliver humanitarian aid. You send them to insert operators behind enemy lines. Around the same time, reports start surfacing. Power outages at key Venezuelan coastal radar sites. Systems going dark. Networks failing. Cyber attacks. Sabotage. Or maybe just conveniently bad infrastructure. In this kind of war, you never know which one it is until it's over. This is what battlefield shaping looks like in the 21st century. Quiet, ambiguous, deniable. So here we are. The largest warship in human history is parked off the coast of South America. A naval blockade is in effect. An oil tanker has already been seized. And the rhetoric between capitals has turned toxic. We are now one misunderstanding away from a shooting war in the Western Hemisphere. Critics are calling this madness. They argue that Operation Southern Spear is a distraction stretching the U.S. Navy thin when its real focus should be the Pacific. They warn that seizing tankers in international waters makes the United States look like the aggressor. Supporters see it differently. They argue this move is long overdue, that you cannot allow a narco state to operate with impunity in America's own neighborhood, that the USS Gerald R. Ford is exactly where it belongs, reminding the world who controls the sea lanes. And that brings us to the real question. What happens next? Does Maduro blink? Does he back down? Or does he feel cornered enough to launch a missile? Because if that missile flies, the Gerald R. Ford won't be a show of force anymore. It will be a launch platform. For the first major American war of the late 2020s, the ocean doesn't take sides. It just hides the wreckage. So what do you think? Is this blockade a necessary move to choke off the cartels? Or is it a trap that could drag the United States into a conflict it doesn't need? Would you have ordered the seizure of the skipper? Let me know your take in the comments. And if you want to track the Ford and understand the technology keeping her afloat, check the links in the description. Stay safe, watch the water. Carry on. This is Titan Navy. I'll see you in the next one.